Hello, everybody. Hello, this is Alex Aquarius. Welcome to the night show. It's currently 12:32 a.m. at my time, Central Time here in Austin, Texas. We're live, we're online, we're streaming. And tonight, what I thought we would talk about is the cosmos above us. And what I mean by cosmos is the alignment of the planets and the stars and everything that's above us. What is the cosmos? We could describe what we see around us. That's called zetetic observation. If we're looking at through a telescope and we find planets that move, they're called the wandering stars. Excuse me. In the Bible, they're called the wandering stars. The stars are fixed. You know, the stars have not moved in relation to each other the way they're spaced out in the cosmos. There's no parallax. Parallax is when things move in front of you and they shift over time. Something closer to you moves faster than something that's further in the distance. That's called parallax as they move with each other. When we look at the stars in the constellations, isn't it odd that we don't have parallax? And over time, since humans have been observing the stars, there has been no shifting or spatial orientation difference of the constellations and any of the stars to each other from our perspective. And think about that. That's pretty damn alarming compared to what we hear, what we're raised up with. Now, don't jump to any conclusions. I'm not jumping straight to flat Earth or anything like that. But I am going to say, I will say, hold on one minute. I am going to say that this is one of the arguments. If we're spinning around and we're hurling through space, what is 1 minute is measured by the time it takes to go 24 hours around the globe to go back to the sun. And the minutes of latitude are measured in minutes. I'm sorry, latitude is measured in degrees from the equator, up 30 degrees, down 30 degrees, down 60. But the longitude lines go by minutes and they go around the globe until they get back to the 24-hour mark. And it's all divided. So if you look at latitude and longitude directions on a map, it's actually given in minutes. So the longitude. Now the latitude, just think of it. If you draw a line around the globe, the waistline is the equator, no duh. But if you go up 30, I know right around where we are now, I think is 31 and a half, 32 degrees latitude north of the equator. So if you drew a 30-degree line like that from the equator going up the ball, the Austin is about 30 degrees up from the equator. That's what that means. So if you go down 60 degrees from the equator south, that's the furthest south that humans are allowed to go. Did you know that? And that's called the Antarctic Treaty. So you can't just get on a ship and go to Antarctica on your own. You can't even form a company and make a charter and go to Antarctica. You won't get a charter wherever those come from in your country or internationally. So no one, even if you try to go, there are videos of fishing boats that go and they try to fish more than 60 degrees south, and they're just not allowed to go. Now, you can go to Antarctica. There are different places you can go to. From the most popular destination is going to Argentina. First, you go to Buenos Aires, then you fly south and you go to Ushuaia, and you usually take off from what's the bay down there called Punta Arenas, or is that Chile's? You go to Argentina or Chile, and then you go over to the American point there on the peninsula that sticks out of Antarctica. But if, let's say, now that's south. If you're going north, I remember Dallas is on the 33rd parallel. That means if you're going up 30 degrees, you go up 33 degrees from the equator. That's where Dallas is, let's say. And I know that if you go south, Buenos Aires and Santiago, Chile are on the 33rd parallel south. So from the equator up, Dallas. From the equator down, Santiago, Chile. Just think about that on the globe. On a flat Earth map, for flat earthers, it's if you're looking at the center and the equator's the line that goes around the middle. If you draw a bigger line with a bigger radius, that's the Tropic of Capricorn, which is 27.5 south. It's a little bit beyond that. And if you draw a smaller line than equator, that's Tropic of Cancer, and that's coming up into North America. So there are two ways to draw it, two ways to think about it. The degrees work just the same, and the sun and the sun's shadow and the sunlight work in the exact same way. It is transferable, convertible, transmutable, the way you present it. But what I want to talk about is the order of the planets. And I want to show you what I've looked up before. And, use the docs menu on the menu bar. Okay. Just got a message. Now, I wanted to show you this band real quick. This is, let's see who this is. This is a School of Rock. Doing, think about the sound mixing. It's pretty hard. You can play the parts, but how about the sound mixing? I heard that guitar. There you go. Could be a little bit more volume on the singing. Don't want to play too much of that. Is that copyrighted? I hope not. Let me restart the capture for you so you can see where I'm at. Darn it, I'm still having to do that. But if we look up, let's look up images of ancient cosmology. Oops, come on. Logi, images of ancient cosmology. Okay. Here we go. How about this one, for example? You can see what I'm looking at, right? There we go. Yes, you do. If you look at this image, we have the layers. That's what gets me is the layers of the planets. Okay, ancient cosmology. This picture right here, you know where it's showing the first heaven is the stars. It's kind of reversed in this one, but see where it's showing the stars. Then it has second heaven is the moon. The third heaven is Mercury, then Venus, then the sun, then Mars. Seventh heaven is Saturn. Where is Jupiter? See up here where it says throne of God? This is what really, really interests me. And I'm going to get to that subject here in a minute. Stay with me. I'm going to show you. Let me check my capture rates. Not capturing again. Okay. Now, if you look at that image, let me go back and see if I can get an even better one. let's look at the results. Look at these images from here. Let's view the file. Okay. Do you see that now? See this? See the blue part here? That's the waters above. It says in the Bible even that God separated the waters from the waters. So think about the waters of the oceans on the bottom here. Then think about the waters above being in the sky, a layer of water that holds stars. And it's in several depictions of all of what we're talking about here is cosmology. This is Egyptian cosmology, Norse, Hindu, Hebrew, Navajo, Inca cosmology. And that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. And if you look, what is, for example, let me move myself out of the way here. If I move there we go. Okay. Egyptian and Norse. Oh, I'm sorry. I could do it. I just messed that up. Let's do it this way. Sphinx looks up in the sky. The Sphinx. I've been to Egypt and Cairo a couple of times. When it's looking directly east, and this constellation that's in the sky behind that the Sphinx is looking at, not behind it, in the morning behind the sun, is the constellation that's the name of the sign or the house that you're in. Like it used to be Pisces, and now it's moving, and it's Aquarius right in front of the Sphinx. So if you look directly east in the morning at sun up, and there's the sun. Good morning, sun. When the sun comes up, if you can look behind the sun right there on the horizon, that's where Aquarius is right now. And my YouTube handle is Alex Aquarius because of the symbol of Aquarius. The symbol of Aquarius is what? It's a man bearing a pitcher of water. And I think he's pouring the water. And I received through revelation, I was praying, and I swear this didn't come from a book. I've seen it written since in books, but maybe I'd read it and it occurred to me. But water is knowledge. So what we're looking at is roughly the periods or the houses or dispensations of the cosmos, or the great year cycle when the sun goes around the entire circle of the zodiac, which is measured. It's 26,000 years roughly. When the sun what was I just saying? I had to do a calculation in my mind and completely lost my train of thought. We're looking at the zodiac and the sign. 2,000 years, 2,100 years roughly is the period of a sign. So since Jesus came, roughly a little time before Jesus to today, has been almost 2,100 years. And that was Pisces. If you look in the Bible, he has the miracle of two fish, and that's his probably greatest miracle. And he represented the two fish, which is the sign of Pisces. A lot of people can correlate what would you call coincidences or alignments or unexplained mysteries in the New Testament of what they call astrotheology, which is based on this cosmos. I was in a different astral body. So I did not see the sun as a fireball. I just remember seeing it as a very densely dotted kind of grainy. You could tell there was a lot of energy coming from it, but everything that I was looking at was in contrasts of shades of gray, let's say. That, but it was a different looking. It was just kind of like moving and spiky, and a lot of energy coming out of it. And I believe now that that was the sun. But like I said, it wasn't this bright orange object like the way we see it, and then I'm saying I just flew right through it. But I went around the first two, but then I went through an asteroid belt. What's not included in this? I was floating over the floor. Let's say there was mist about that thick above the floor, and and ahead of me, let's say maybe 200 yards away, 200 meters, 250. There were little figures, but they were so bright. Oh, it was dark. There was a black sky, no stars. It was at nighttime on Earth, but where I was at was dark. It was like heaven's nighttime. I did not see a heavenly sky or anything like that. But the floor was where the light was coming from Earth. I think it was lit to where I could see the Earth under the floor. And when I looked down through the floor, I could see all of these continents, and I could see the center. But I noticed what looked like the center, but kind of like the drawings of Atlantis, where you see circles and things. I noticed the center and kind of some circular patterns of the continents, but I did not recognize the continents as we see them on a map today. Like everyone knows what South America looks like with the Horn, and also Africa. And you can recognize the Indian subcontinent, and everybody knows what Japan looks like, in Australia. And you can recognize if you get the right angle. Europe's kind of hard to spot. Europe and Russia, and going over into the Turkish empires and out in that direction. It's, for me, that's kind of hard to label. But if you were to say, where is Syria on this map, showing me that what I'm talking about is called the azimuthal equidistant map. And that's where the center is the North Pole. And all of the longitude lines are based as rays going out from the center. And then everything around the edge would be south. And I believe around the south, there would be 3 outlets at least where ships can sail through. So we're not on this disk accelerating through space like the society, Flat Earth Research Society, says for the last couple of decades. We're actually on an infinite plane that has hundreds of continents. And I saw it through the floor. But this was in 1985. I was only 19 years old. I believe it was around my birthday time. I was about to turn 20, so I was almost 20. And I'm looking at this world below the floor, and I thought, this must be heaven, but it must be some other realm of gods. But where's Earth? I was looking for this. I'd just gone through all those planets, and I knew I was only 20. I had not studied cosmology. So I didn't really know. As each planet went by, as I went through them, they all lined up. They lined up in front of me from where I was. I went around the first one and then the second one. And then the next one lined up in front of me. I went around it, and then my spirit told me to go through them. And then I saw some asteroids. I went around a few, and then I just focused, and I saw my spirit around me. It was like my energy torus. And I realized I no longer was in my body. And so I just went forward, and I was expecting to feel it, and I did not. And then that's when I went around. I was going up, I was floating off the floor. I could see these two beings in front of me made of light. They were just enormously brilliant. And I knew immediately that that was God and the Lord over there on the horizon. And they were about, let's say, 200 to 250 meters, yards in front of me. And I was just floating towards them. And the way that I had this out of body experience was I was I was in a missionary discussion. We were visiting a family, and we were going to baptize that family. Hoped we would. And I was a Mormon missionary, and I grew up Mormon and in Houston, and my mother was a convert. And when you go when you're 19 years old, you apply. And I applied, and I got a letter that said I was going to Cordoba, Argentina. And I had to look on a map and make sure to see where Cordoba was. It's kind of in central Argentina, just west of Buenos Aires province. But there I was in Cordoba. I was in the main city at the family's house. I remember their name was Coria, Coria. If you know them, give them a shout in Cordoba if you're there in their neighborhood, near Nueve de Julio, part of town, the 9th of July. So the father said he would only be baptized if he received a really strong answer from, like, he was reading the Book of Mormon, but if he prayed and just felt the Spirit come over him, or some type of a sign was given that the family should do it, they were going to do it. So then I was praying, and my partner, my companion, was giving the discussion, and I remember sitting there like this. I had my fingers interlocked, and I had already given my first half of the discussion. I had like my thumbs on my lips, and I was just kind of staring at the tablecloth. And I'm thinking, gosh, I wish I could, be baptized. And I was just kind of intently thinking about it. And then suddenly this vibration came into my body, and it kind of was rushing through me, and I didn't move. And it just went, the frequency pitch just started going up. And just into these incredibly high range beyond my comprehension, and my body just started filling up with energy. And I thought I was going to explode. I thought if I moved a finger, my arms would have blown apart. My body would have just gone through the cinder block wall behind me, and I would have knocked the kitchen over. And I just was concentrating on the energy and it overcoming me, and I couldn't handle it anymore. And I'm asking God, what is happening? And then suddenly I heard like a pop. And I say it was like a soap bubble. When the soap bubble pops, it goes, that sound. And it, it was more of a click in it also, kind of like and suddenly there I was. And I looked around and I was floating about 30 feet above the house. I was about, yeah, 3, 4 meters above the house. And I'm looking around and I see the city lights of Cordoba and from the Nueve de Julio neighborhood that we were in into I can see the downtown area and I'm looking around and I look up and that's when I saw the moon off to my right and I recognized it as the moon. But it was different. It did not have the craters on it and look like we see the moon as with it just looked like the energy color, not without the gray um, parts of the craters. And when I went around it, and then I went back around again, and then I saw another planet, but I didn't know which one it was. I assumed it was Venus, and I went around it, and then I went around. There was a planet in front of me, and I didn't want to hit it, so I went around it to the right side, and I dodged it, but the planet seemed to be lining up in front of me. And then I think I saw asteroids, and I saw these big chunk, and I remember thinking, "Wow, there really are asteroids." And I flew around a couple, and then that's when it was either in my mind or the Lord spoke to me, said, "You go through them." And so I noticed, I looked out to the side and I saw my halo or my spirit. It's more of a spherical, and what it is, it's your energy torus. Everything has an energy torus. And I'm learning that we as human beings and our spirit inside of us comes out as our energy torus, our fractal energy body. Not fractal, but anyway, so I went through the rest of the asteroids, and then I went through the sun, which was, I noticed the next planet was the one that had all of the energy on it. It was a very dense gray, but you could tell it was spiking with energy around the edges, and it seemed very grainy and moving. And I didn't think at the time as I was going through it, oh, this is the sun. But I knew without cognitively affirming it in my mind or my thoughts or speaking to myself or affirming it to myself in thought, I knew it. I knew that was the sun. But then I remember Jupiter. I knew what Jupiter was because when I saw um, the next one would be Saturn. And that's right, I did see the one with the rings around it. And I thought, oh, there's Saturn. And then the next, I think it was the next one. But when I saw Jupiter, it was huge. It took up all the panoramic view that I was basically having almost. And I was thinking as I went through it, wow, I'm going through Jupiter. But you go right through the middle of them and they're all lined up. It's one path. And you're going at such a high rate. When I was in that house in the kitchen, sitting at the table, staring at the tablecloth, just with my fingers over like this. And as I'm out and I'm flying, everything's accelerating and accelerating, and I'm going faster, and I'm going around and through the asteroids, and then through the sun, and then Saturn, and then Jupiter. What is the order here on this chart? this on combo. Let's go here. Let's put this on combo and go back to the other ones. Now see the blue part here? This is the body of Nut, N-U-T, the Egyptian goddess Nut. Her body holds the stars in it. She's the water. She would be the water above in the Hebrew Old Testament. That's why stars twinkle, because they're in water. Have you ever laid on the bottom of your pool with the mask on and you look up at objects like your friend standing there on the side of the pool and their body jiggling to the surface water undulations, and it's not perfectly still? That's why stars twinkle. You're looking at stars through a water layer. And how do I know that? Because I went through it. I didn't go through just the planets. I started to go through the water as well. And that's when I really sped up. After I passed the last planet, which I think was Neptune, I remember the blackness of night started turning bright, 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 bright white. And I think it's because I was getting closer to the stars that are in the water. And then I just shot into this water layer, but it was like going, the movie that was with Jodie Foster where she goes through through that wormhole. She's in that sphere and she's in that chair and it starts rattling and it's curving through all these curvy shapes. But the way they depicted that with the fluid is like a wormhole, but it's kind of like combine that, but straight ahead without turning. And then started off with the Star Wars Millennium Falcon when it goes into warp drive, or Star Trek when they hit warp drive. It literally, I don't think everything turned white because of the speed. I used to. I think it's a combination of both. But as you speed up, the blackness just starts pixelating or changing into whiteness. And then suddenly everything brightens up and you approach the water. And then you're in, like the movies and the shows depict, a wormhole. But I think what I was doing is going straight through the waters above. And then I went through that. And then suddenly it just all faded away. And I'm standing, I'm floating above the floor, but I'm in a robe. I've got a white robe on. It's going about halfway down to my forearms. I've got a robe on. I'm floating, like I said, about a foot or more above the floor. And I'm floating towards what I see out there, and I think is Heavenly Father and the Lord. And my mute button worked. I coughed. So I go out and I'm hovering at like a jogging or a running speed toward them. And I go right up to the being that's on my left. And when I first recounted this, I thought, and I went right up and spoke to God, and Lord was on my right side. And the being that spoke with me didn't say, I am God, or I am the Lord. You call me Jesus. Or that God that I spoke with did not identify himself. But they were both men. They were both brilliantly transparent, skinned, illuminated beings that were, you talked about the illuminated ones. These were the true Illuminati in the purest, most heavenly sense. That means the enlightened, illumined ones. These beings were completely made of light. And it just beamed out of their skin. Have you seen depictions of like the crystal skulls? I don't even remember the complete story about them, but there's a woman that has one of them. Several people around the world have these crystal skulls that were made. But when you shine a light through that, imagine what that looks like, but with skin over it. But these beings, the Lord has a very, like the drawings of him, I remember like in the LDS church, are pretty close, but he has more of a Norse, broader, this part of the face is more like mine. See how my face is more square? I have a more square mandible face. It's like this, but he has more of the square jaw structure. But he's bigger, massively bigger. And he was like, I'm going to guess 8 feet tall, right in front of me. I was as close as maybe 3 feet. I was maybe 3 feet away from him, but I was looking up at an angle like that. I was looking up definitely, but he wasn't far away from me, like from here to the wall over here in my room. But he tall, not a giant, wasn't 9 footer, but I would say 7.5, 8 feet tall, maybe not 8 feet. Let me think. Looking right at him, he was. I'm gonna guess about 7.5 feet tall. But I was floating off of the floor, and I did see steps. There were white steps. Now, I personally don't believe that Heavenly Father, God, and the Lord, that they're on these steps the entire time we're living on this earth. I could be wrong, but I would like to imagine that they go off to their own world, which is magnificent, and we cannot even imagine it. And they have other places that they go and where they live, but this is like their work. Their work is creating Earth and all of the inhabitants that are on Earth, on all of the continents, the hundreds that I saw, which I would think each planet, if they all line up, they would each have a line, like those cosmology drawings draw, where each surface of a planet's radiology would hit the Earth in a ring, like a halo. And they must live in the halo. This is just one idea I had. Because maybe there are beings from the different planets, but they have a space on Earth where maybe they're inhabiting. Because I went through them, and the planets are actually made of light, but in another dimension, maybe if you get to a higher frequency, you may be able to inhabit that planet. But it's not going to be solid in this frequency. Like when we look up and we say we're going to go to Mars and stand on it and put a rover on it. No. Do you remember when the Mars rover first went up? On the first day, I think it was the next day, there was a storm and it got dusted over, and the mirror got dirty and they couldn't see the reflection anymore, and the images did not work. Who remembers that? Raise your hand. Too bad I can't see hands being raised. But then I can't remember the number of hours or if it was the next day. They said, luckily, another storm had come by, and it must have had more moisture, and it cleaned it off. Either that, or there was someone on Mars with Windex, and that just stepped out from behind a rock. I have a neighbor that was telling me that he was looking at some Mars photos that the rover sent back, and he could see a man fighting a tyrannosaur. And I said, really? How would he be on the surface of Mars fighting a tyrannosaur? And I mean, he was literally like Star Trek, like Captain Kirk when he's fighting the lizard man with the zipper on the back of his costume. And he's literally showing, he sent me these pictures from the Mars rover, which have what he's looking at, it's called pareidolia. If you look at something and you see, like when you look at clouds and you think, well, that looks like a dog, or that looks like a ship with sails, or, you see figures in clouds and you recognize faces. Or you can be in the woods and you can be looking around for things, and suddenly your eyes move around and you're looking for maybe animals looking back at you. So you start looking for eyes, and your brain is trained to recognize those things, maybe for survival skills. That's what people say. But then if you look and you see rocks and you look at different shapes, you say, that one kind of looks like a tyrannosaur. And that looks like a man with his hands out. Oh, yeah, look, they're around its neck. And he's got the dinosaur by the neck, and he's fighting the dinosaur. And that's what I see. And this man shared me those pictures, and he told me that. And that's when I realized that I've seen this guy coming and going. He's a musician from my apartment community, and he carries a guitar. So I know he's got buddies. I know he jams with people. Or goes somewhere with that guitar. But when he actually came and said there was a man actually wrestling a dinosaur on Mars, And I told him, have you heard of pareidolia? No, what's that? When I told him the part about the rover there and the Windex, he goes, man. He took off. That it was at night, and he went off back to his apartment. But then the next day, he talked to me again. I thought he was not going to talk to me again, since I told him about the rover cleaning off its surfaces all by itself in the storm. And it just started working again. The cameras, the images started coming because suddenly the surfaces were clean. Something cleaned them off. That's when I started to really doubt the Mars rover mission. The other thing was the helicopter blades that lowered. What was it? Was it the rover itself? What was it that had the blades when they were calculating how they were going to spin helicopter blades to bring the thing down? It wasn't the whole entire rover itself, was it? I think it was. They had the parachute and then blades, but they had to calculate the density of 1/6. That's the moon is 1/6 of gravity. But uh-oh. My recording stopped, but I believe I'm still streaming. I just got a message. So anyway, they were using like drone technology to figure out how to lower down this rover on the surface of Mars. You've never been there. You got temperatures, densities, atmospheres. But what I've seen is Mars is just made of light. The moon is a plasmic object. And many, many, many scientists said this before the Apollo missions. Now, here's where the fork in the road comes. Do you believe that the moon is something you can stand on or not? I don't personally now. It looks like a round object, and it has, you can see the craters. And some people say that the moon could be flat, but the moon doesn't spin. We always see the same face of the moon. But the craters, as they go around the surface and they get toward the circumference, they become elliptical. And I took drafting in high school, and I learned how to use elliptical parallax angles. You could get a circle, and then if you turn 10 degrees, it starts to flatten out. Then there's 60 degrees, and a circle, it becomes an ellipse. But that's the definition of an ellipse. It's just a flattened, like think of many logos that have ellipses. They're just flattened circles. Think of looking directly at a circle perpendicular to you, standing up parallel to you, and then leaning it back 30 degrees, and then lean it back to 60 degrees. You're going to be looking at an oval shape. It's not going to be a round circle. It's going to be an ellipse. So that's how the degrees of ellipses are measured. But you can see that on the moon's surface with the craters. So I do believe it is a spherical object. Now, if you were going, you couldn't stand on the moon if it's some kind of light structure, and it gives off its own light. I've noticed, I even took a picture. I can't remember if I made a video. I have several videos that I made. I got into it 6 or 7 years ago. But I remember seeing in the evening one time, there was the sun going down, and then I could turn around almost 180 degrees behind me, and there was, sun was going down, but the moon, the way it was waxing or waning, had the terminator, which is the line between light and dark, at an angle that would indicate that the moon was over there somewhere, but the moon was setting over there. So there was a discrepancy, a bifurcation, if you will, a fork in the road between what people say that the moon is reflecting the rays of the sunshine. It's not true. The moon has its own light. It's a different light. You can get a temperature reader and measure shadows behind trees in the moonlight, and it's actually warmer in the shadow and colder in the moonlight. Do you know that? In the sun, when you get in the shade, it's cooler. In the moonlight, it's warmer in a shadow and colder in the direct moonlight. It's like the negative polar energy of whatever the sun is light. It's like cathodal light. Instead of a cathode to be negative and an anode is positive, if the sun was anodal light and the moon would be cathodal light, would be the opposite. I don't know if that's true. It may just be light at a different frequency, pulse width, or waveform. but it's not. I don't believe, just from observation. This is all from observations I've made. Something that you could stand on. Now, where were we going with all that in this discussion about this chart? This Yeah, my dad was into that, or my mom was into that, and I've seen this. Yeah, and everybody's used to it, and I like to see. Um, we're getting away with it as far as covering it and exposing it, and YouTube has been the biggest benefactor of mankind for that, to be the first video platform where these things could be looked at. And this one I like. If you look at this screen, let's just look at the screen. I could see, like I was saying, just I was looking off about there was sitting the Lord. I mean, God. As I've been raised, that was God the Father. But the one who spoke to me was the Lord. But he's a big, massive, corpulent figure, very strong, broader face than what's painted in the Christian churches. More of a broader square jaw like mine, but a bigger, massive figure. But he asked me the first thing he said in Spanish, because I was living in Cordoba. He said, ¿Qué es lo que quieres? What is it that you want? And I said, first of all, there were no introductions or anything. This was all speaking. And his lips moved. And I said, that you answer them so that they can be baptized. And he looked at me and he said, why? And I said, because I love them. And I waved my arm over the floor and I looked down. The mist on the floor spread away. And I could see down into the kitchen that I'd just come from. And I could see myself. And my companion was sitting on my left. And then the father at the end of the table. And then the mother with the child on her lap. And the other children sitting, 2 teenagers in front of me and the other child to my right. So there were all 8 of us sitting around the kitchen table, and we're in heaven looking down through the floor where God can see anyone in any room in your house. You cannot hide. Everything you're doing, think about it. The next time you're going to go do something naughty, let's say you're going to be with someone you shouldn't be with, or you're going to do some drug. Let's say you're going to masturbate. I'm going to ruin it for everybody. You're having relations with your partner. God can literally see everything right through the roof. The roof of the house was transparent and invisible. It was like it wasn't even there. It was like, but the thing that astonishes me about this was I'm the one that said, just look at them. And I waved my arm over the floor. And the mist opened up like it was a looking glass. And we were looking right into the kitchen. I would say in distance, the way we measure it, we were looking down like I was above the house, like 30 feet down. But just looking right into the kitchen, or the roof of the house, or any construction materials between those people sitting at that table, including myself and me above, and the Lord and God the Father, we were maybe at the most like 40 feet above that. And the roof was insignificant. You could not see the roof. It was just transparent view. The floor under God's feet was transparent, and the roof of the house was transparent. It was just from our eyeballs straight through to the people sitting around a table. But it was so short, my visit, because I started to look at that and I started thinking, and I know the Lord and God, they could read my thoughts out loud. So I was thinking out loud, and I thought out loud where he could hear me. And I said, what is baptism? Why do we do it? What does it mean? And where does it come from? What is its origin? Why is it so important that we dunk ourselves in water? And that's a symbol of what the Lord did. And suddenly I was right back in my body, and I was in the discussion sitting around the table. And I felt this, I had more questions, please, Lord. And I wasn't able to do it. And I noticed my companion was still giving his part of the discussion. And I looked around. I still had my hands together, and I was in the exact same position that I was in when I left, and I hadn't moved. And then I looked at the girl in front of me, and then over at the boy, and no one was looking at me. No one was eyeballing me like, what's going on with him? Nobody, if everybody started focusing on me, like if I had just been sitting there staring like a statue, it would have looked odd. But everything that I experienced, from popping out of my body to looking around the city to noticing the moon and flying around it, to all the way through these planets, the asteroids, the big Jupiter. Then after the planets were done, there was a period of accelerating, I say, for everything turned white, and then I'm in a wormhole. It was like 6 or 7 seconds. And then woof, I was into the water layer where the stars are. And then as I was going through that, and the whole time I'm accelerating and everything got so bright. And then it's like that song, what am I think of? The Beatles. Woke up, got out of bed, dragged the comb across my head. You know what is it? The accident scene when you hear the symphony and everything's, was it a cacophony of noises and you hear the piano ding, 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 ding. But there was no piano. It was just all of that rush of speed and the water and the light. And suddenly it was quiet visually, visual quietness. I'm saying things that don't exist in the human body. I'm noticing, like I was thinking out loud and visual loudness. Everything had calmed down and I was just floating above this misty floor when I saw the two beings off over 200 meters in front of me, maybe 300. Hold on. So it was an amazing experience, but it was very short. And Lord, I want to do it again. I want to learn more. And I'm sharing it with you on live stream. I'm putting this out on YouTube. What happened? And to answer, before we end with this with a prayer, I want everybody to experience that. I think the reason why I was able to do that is because I was worthy. I was so into my mission. I've since left the church because of principal doctrines and misbehaviors of the prophets. And also connections to what we call the Illuminati and what the Rothschilds and the Vatican and the forces that should not be or running the planet with today. The LDS Church was right there in the structure. It was even named. I found it in a book in a Masonic library that Brigham Young's mentor was the same mentor as Albert Pike. And if you know Masonics, if you know anything about Masons, Albert Pike is the one who wrote The Morals and Dogma of the Scottish Rite. And that's a book that they refer to for a lot of their gospel, the thinkings of the Mason. If you have Morals and Dogma, you need to read it. Let me go and put this back on the scene. If you have Morals and Dogma, you need to read it. And I'm sorry I left that off there on my camera. It wasn't on me. But Albert Pike wrote that. But then Brigham Young, about the same time, lived at the same time as Albert, but Brigham was pioneering across the West after Joseph Smith had died by a mob from the lodges in the area that killed him in Ohio. And then when they came over the mountains and they arrived to Salt Lake City, he saw the Ensign Peak, which is the surveying landmark central spot where you start in Utah. It's all based on Ensign Peak. But he came over it's just like the Mexican flag where you see the eagle with the snake in its mouth. And it's very symbolic. And that's where in winter quarters, when the Mormon pioneers were in winter quarters, which was in, were they in? They weren't in Minnesota. What's south? Were they in? Were they in Ohio? No, they'd left. Can't remember what state they were in, but they stayed in a place called Winter Quarters. It's what is north of, east of Idaho, north of Nevada. Skipping my mind right now, but Winter Quarters, before they arrived in Utah, that would be further east from what I'm saying. This man named Peter Desmet, Jean-Pierre Desmet. Now, who was Peter Desmet? Peter Desmet was a guy who was a Jesuit missionary who was the mentor of Brigham Young, and he was also the mentor of Albert Pike. And I read this in famous American figures in American history who were Masonic. The title's something like that, but prominent Freemasons in American history. I think that's the title. I was just skimming through it. It was online. The library was open. I just started pulling books in the Masonic library. I think it was the one out of Phoenix. And this was like 15 years ago or more. And I saw that the same man, this guy from Belgium, Peter, Jean-Pierre, his name was Peter. They called him Peter. He was also a traveler. He was supposed to be a friend of the Indians. He made friends with a lot of the indigenous culture in America before everyone went west. So he met with Brigham Young at winter quarters. I found that documented. And then told him where Inside Peak would be once he came over the mountains and he saw the Salt Lake. So when Brigham Young came across, there's a famous quote where Brigham said, they woke him up, he was sick in the wagon, and he sat up and he said, "This is the place, drive on." Now you can put in there in brackets, "This is the place that Peter told me about, drive on." Because that's what it says in the Masonic Library. And Peter, and then it says also, was the mentor of Albert Pike. Well, Albert Pike wrote Morals and Dogma. And there is a belief that Adam is or was God, and Brigham Young had an Adam God theory. And if you look at the esoteric philosophies of the Masonic religion, it is a religion. They say it's not, but it's a belief system. There's also Adam is God. So that's where that came from. It's the teachings through the Jesuit missionary. And there's a tie there to Jesuits to high-ranking Freemasons. And did you know Dealey Plaza is a consecrated site for the Masonic Temple? I don't think it was ever built there, but right where Jack Kennedy died was in the center of the temple. So like his death, the top of his head was removed in the fourth level of the death penalties for completely converting or having your brain on a different track than the society. That's your penalty. You swear to those things, it's blood in, blood out at 4 different levels. And it is also it used to be in the Mormon church that way, but they removed the death penalties in 1990. So what am I getting into? The mission that I was on, why I left the church. The deeper I dove, the more I just figured out, no religion at all from what the Lord told me, especially any one of them that have baptism, because baptism represents the death and the resurrection of Tammuz and these sun figures who die on the 22nd of December, and then they're resurrected on the 25th, 3 days dead. But it actually represents on a globe. If you're looking out your window, if you look, the sun goes west for the northern hemisphere. As the sun goes into fall, if you drew a pencil, if you're looking at a point and you look out and you drew on a ledge, like your window ledge, as the sun goes left in the west, and it gets to a point where it goes the furthest south, and it will go on the same, if you marked it with a pencil on a 2x4 or your windowsill or the ledge on a balcony or porch, you'd have with the pencil on the same spot for 3 days, and then it would start moving to the right again if you're looking west and coming back up to the central point in the middle of the summer, which is the summer solstice. Solstice just means where the sun stands. The summer sun stand and the winter sun stand. Solstice just means sun stand. So I figured all that out. I know how to explain it, and I can picture it all in my head on a global model or the flat infinite plane model. And we'll talk about more the next time we get together. Let's have prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for having us all gather together. Those who see this video, I don't see anyone commenting in there, but there could be people watching, and there will be. And please guide us and bless us. And those who are in need, there are a lot of people suffering right now, Father, a lot of pain. Please, with whatever energy that you can put into their easing of that pain, with our desires and energy and our will, please will it that these people will be able to bear their sufferings. And if not, that they may pass peacefully back to thy presence. And there is so much dis-ease on the earth right now, Father. It's hard for us to bear and focus on. And so many wars, tribulations, rumors of wars coming. And what are we supposed to do besides try to ignore it and live our day-to-day life and everything's normal. And we just went through a freeze. But you turn on the news and you look at what the president's doing, which seems to be what he was not about, of our country in the United States. And just everything is upside down. Prominent figures are assassinated. Truth is occulted and hidden. But overall, help us to be well, endure, and always let's get the word out of where you are, Heavenly Father, straight up above all of the planets. Amen. All right. Hope that does some people some good. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.